Dr. Anna Kingsford, an insightful English theosophist of the 1880s, was said to be clairvoyant from the time she could speak. She herself felt that she came from the fairy realm and was given permission to be born as a human being so as to carry out her destiny. At the tender age of 13, Anna wrote the book, Beatrice, A Tale of the Early Christians. Her early wisdom can be seen in the following excerpt. How foolish are they who seek to promote their own comfort by making it their sole study. They lose the very object of their desires and invariably render themselves restless and unhappy. While maintaining her spiritual and vegetarian interests, Anna Kingsford became a doctor. Not only was she one of the first female medical doctors in England, she graduated from medical school without experimenting on any animals. The subject of her medical degree thesis was vegetarianism and ethics. This led Dr. Kingsford to the writing and publishing of a well-received book, The Perfect Way in Diet. Dr. Kingsford continued with her inner spiritual and mystical experiences, which she documented in several books, in collaboration with longtime friend Edward Maitland. She also became known as an outspoken animal and women's rights activist. In The Perfect Way, or The Finding of Christ, the spiritual values of Christianity and Theosophy are merged to identify the Christ principle which everyone is capable of discovering within. We now share with you selections from the book's 5th lecture, which highlights the impermanence of our physical world compared to the true and eternal nature of the divine, and while these higher realms manifest through a myriad of physical forms, our true nature is only freed after the divine spirit within has reconnected with God. The 5th lecture, The Constitution of Existence, Part 3. The process of polarization in matter is itself dependent on the existence and direction of the magnetic forces of its particles. Science has demonstrated the presence around every material molecule of particular currents which, before magnetization, are indeterminately and heterogeneously directed and mutually antagonistic, but which, after magnetization, circulate in such a manner that not only do all assume the same direction in parallel planes, but their central points are also all disposed in linear series parallel to the axis of the entity to which the molecules belong, which thus becomes a system of circular currents, equal and parallel throughout its mass. Every form of matter is capable of magnetization, and every molecule of matter, therefore, is capable of developing a current of its own, and is necessarily likewise possessed of poles and an equator. These poles, which before magnetization are heterogeneously directed, assume under magnetization such a position as to form continuous lines of rays, and the contiguity of the positive pole of every molecule to the negative pole of its immediate successor constitutes the series a chain of magnetic attraction. That which is, in physical science, the magnetic current inherent in every molecule of matter is, in hermetic science, the will of the microcosmic individual. The 2 molecular poles represent the dual ego of every personality, and the equator the unity of this duality. In the system of the unregenerate man, there are many elementary wills, all mutually antagonistic and destructive, the mind warring against the heart, and the senses against the intuition, so that the man is, as it were, torn by contrary winds and carried hither and thither by diverse passions. And of this condition, the result is first spiritual disease, that is, sin, and finally death, that is, dissolution. But in the regenerate man, one harmonious will prevails throughout the whole being. Because of every element therein, the will, which is the spirit, operates in one direction, causing every elementary ego to polarize itself centrally, and thus producing throughout the whole system a regularized series of molecular currents, of which the resultant collective current is the will of the man himself. And of this will, united by attraction to the divine will, which is the universal magnet, the central point of radiation is the microcosmic God, the Adonai of the human kingdom. Himself, the express image of the infinite personality. Such is the condition of the man regenerate and redeemed. By the violation of this harmony is set up disease, which is spiritual or physical, according to the sphere of the disturbance. For the destruction of the polar equilibrium of the cells gives rise to cross-magnetisms, and these, in their turn, cause, in the protoplasmic medium of the cells affected, eddies and other irregular currents, which whirl with accelerated velocity around the local foci, which have generated them, and, by attracting within their sphere the disintegrated particles of ruptured cells in their vicinity, presently cause these to become manifest as masses of protoplasmic granulation. Such also is the generation of the astral incubi and ephemera. It occurs through the disintegration of the collective will of the system concerned, and the divergence of the parts in different directions, with consequent dispersion of the mental forces, and their dissipation in the extraneous and illusory. Neither disease nor death, in the ordinary meaning of the word, could reign in a perfectly polarized entity, as neither sin nor weakness could be manifest in a soul perfectly harmonized with and obedient to the divine will. But instead of the process of death, as we are ordinarily accustomed to see it, with all its attendant horrors of suffering, delirium and corruption, would be witnessed the passing away of the regenerate, in whom the earthly soul has become suffused with the divine, and every element of the human personality vitalized by spirit. The Buddha Gautama, when dying, said to his disciples, "Beloved, that which causes life causes also death and decay." The allusion was, doubtless, to the operation of the magnetic body, by which is formed the embryo before birth, and by which, likewise, the magnetic forces of the earthly frame are gradually reabsorbed and exhausted. That which puts forth centrifugally resolves centripetally when its cycle is accomplished. In the healthily born, purely nourished, unpoisoned and undrugged body, death resembles transmutation rather than dissolution. Disintegration of the organism ensues as a result not of any pathological process, for that would imply physical sin of a mortal kind, but of the gradual withdrawal of the animal life into the magnetic and consequent gradual reinforcement of the latter, precisely as in the cell about to disintegrate, its protoplasmic contents are seen to become better defined, and to increase as, simultaneously, their containing capsule becomes more tenuous and transparent. And where the astral, or merely protoplasmic, has itself been in great measure transmuted into psychic substance, the process implies necessarily a reversion from the material to the spiritual plane. In such wise have passed away most of the saints and holy men of all lands, and with a dissolution of this kind, the relations of the redeemed soul with matter may terminate altogether. It is the consummation of the redemption from the power of the body and from the sting of death, which is sin. Let me die the death of the righteous, and let my last end be like his.
Because the law of heaven is, a life destroyed must be compensated. Teachings of the Saints, Caldaism.
Marvelous viewers, it's been delightful to have your company for today's Words of Wisdom.